Hi, boys and girls. This is Pat Boone with Stories That Live, Series 2. The stories on this cassette tape are Moving Day, Avoiding Strife, Ishmael, Special Friends, Sodom and Gomorrah, and God Keeps His Word. Now, open your storybook and read along as you listen to the greatest stories in the world. The special little songs are done by Brenda and Kim Inns.
He has done great things. He has done great things. He has done great things. Bless His holy name.
God had confused the language of the people at the Tower of Babel. Different families had scattered far and wide. In the country we now call Iraq, there was a place called Ur. This is where Abram and Sarai were living. They owned large herds of cattle and sheep. Because God knows the hearts of people, He knew that Abram could be trusted. One day, God spoke to Abram. He said, "I want you to leave your family and relatives. I am going to take you to a new land. I will give it to you. You will become a great nation, and all the earth will be blessed because of you." Abram could not understand how this could happen. You see, his wife Sarai had never had any children, and now she was too old to have a baby. But Abram obeyed God and did as He had said. Abram couldn't get a moving van, so he put everything he owned into wagons. His servants herded the cattle and sheep as they traveled. Abram had a nephew named Lot who came along. The land to which Abram and Sarai were moving was called the land of Canaan. Today, we call it the country of Israel. After Abram and Sarai had lived in Canaan for just a short while, a famine broke out. There was very little grass for the animals or food for the people. Abram decided to move again. He would go to the neighboring country of Egypt. While they were traveling, Abram began thinking. He knew that Sarai was very beautiful. When the king sees her, he will want to take her as his wife. He may even kill me, he thought. Abram had an idea. It was not a good idea, for lying never is. He told Sarai to say that she was his sister. When Abram and Sarai arrived in Egypt, it happened just as Abram had imagined. The king wanted Sarai as his wife. He gave Abram gifts of sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels, and even servants. But Abram was not happy. How could he be happy when his pretty wife, whom he loved so much, was going to become the king's wife? Abram didn't know what to do, but God did. A terrible plague broke out in the king's palace. "Why has this happened to us?" the king began to wonder. He spoke to Abram and found out the truth. Sarai was Abram's wife. "Here, take Sarai and everything you own and leave," said the king. Once again, Abram was moving back to Canaan. He knew that God was going to protect him and Sarai and everything they owned.
Abraham's blessings are mine. Abraham's blessings are mine. I am blessed in the city and I'm blessed in the field. Abraham's blessings are mine. Abraham's blessings are mine.
God blessed Abram's ranch. Cattle and sheep, goats and camels were everywhere. Cows had healthy calves, and ewes had strong lambs. Abram was becoming a wealthy man. Abram's nephew Lot lived close by. His herds of sheep and cattle increased too. Abram could see that there was going to be trouble. There wasn't enough grass for all the animals. Abram's and Lot's servants began to fight with each other. They tried to get to the best watering holes and tallest grass first. Abram had a hard decision to make. He loved Lot and his family, but he knew that they would have to separate. When God had first told Abram to move away from his relatives, he should have left Lot back in Iraq. Now he had to ask him to leave. Abram was a very kind man. He knew that God wanted them to live in peace. He said, "Lot, let's not fight. Look at all the land around us. I will give you the first choice. If you want the land on the right, I'll take the land on the left. If you go east, then I will go west." Lot liked being able to choose first. That way he could take the best land. He looked across the plains of Jordan toward the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. There the grass was high and green, with plenty of water for his animals. "I'll take the plains of Jordan," he announced. "Very well," said Abram. "I'll take the hill country." Once again there was packing and loading and counting of cattle as Abram and Lot were separating. Now Abram knew that there would be no more fighting between the servants. Did Lot make the right decision by moving to Sodom and Gomorrah? Should he have let his older uncle Abram make the first choice? Finally, Abram and Sarai were alone. This had been God's plan for them when he had first spoken to Abram. One day, as Abram was walking on his hilly ranch, God spoke to him again. "Abram," God said, "look to the east and west, north and south. I will give all the land that you can see to you and your children. It will be yours forever. Your children will be just as many as the little pieces of dust on the ground, far more than you can count. Walk across this land that I have promised you. It is all yours." Abram liked owning all this land. He now had plenty of room for all his animals. God had kept his promise to Abram. He had made him a very rich man. But what did God mean when he talked about children? Abram and Sarai were too old to have children. Did God know something that they didn't know?
John 4:7-8.
The sun had gone down, and the cattle were resting. The crickets were chirping along the path as Abram stood outside his tent. This was a good time to talk to God. God had been so good to him. Abram heard someone calling his name. He knew that voice. It was God speaking. He said, "Abram, don't be afraid. I will protect you, and I will give you good things." Abram already had plenty of gold and silver. He had a lot of land, cattle, and sheep, What else could God give him? Abram said, God, if you continue to give me more, to whom can I give it? I have no children. I can only give it to my oldest servant. God replied, You will be the father of a son. He will inherit the blessings that I'm giving you. I want you to look up. Count the stars. Abram began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, 200, 1,000. He gave up. There were just too many stars to count. That is how many children you will have, God said. In his heart, Abram knew that what God was saying was going to happen, but how it would happen, he did not know. God was pleased with Abram because he trusted that God would keep his promises. Abram and Sarai both loved God and loved each other. Sarai knew how much Abram wanted a son. She knew that Abram believed he would become a father. He talked about it very often. One day, Sarai came up with a plan. Abram, she said, we have a good maid, and we both like her. Take her as your wife. Maybe she will be the mother of your children. The maid's name was Hagar. She had come from Egypt with Abram and Sarai. It seemed like a good idea to Abram. Instead of asking God, he made his own decision and married Hagar. Now he had 2 wives, and that's asking for trouble. Had Abram made a mistake by not waiting for God? Should Abram have spent more time talking and praying with Sarai? One day, Hagar announced that she was going to have a baby. Abram wanted to take good care of her. She must have the best food and get plenty of sleep. Her bed must be made more comfortable. Sarai was jealous. She missed getting this special attention. Abram is being too kind to Hagar, she thought. It isn't fair. Sarai started mistreating Hagar, so Hagar decided to run away. In the wilderness, God spoke to Hagar through an angel. I will make your son a great nation, said the angel. Go back to Abram's house. When Abram was 86 years old, his first son was born. Abram named him Ishmael. Ishmael would become the father of the Arab nations. Ishmael was growing up fast. He was a strong lad and liked to be outdoors. His father, Abram, wanted Ishmael to love God as much as he did. One day, when Abram was 99 years old, God came to speak to him. I am the God who is more than enough, he said. I want to have a special relationship with you. This will be called our covenant. I want to be your closest friend, and I want you to be my special friend. Everything I have will be yours if you need it. Everything you have will be mine if I need it. Abram had made many mistakes, but God knew his heart. Abram felt honored. God had given him a son, all this land and cattle. Now, God even wanted to be his best friend. God kept on talking. He said, I want to change your name. You will be Abraham, which means the father of many nations. I want you to call Sarai Sarah, because she will be the mother to the special son that I have promised you. Abraham laughed. I'm almost 100 years old, and Sarah is 90. Are you saying that we will have a baby? God said, yes, Sarah will have a son. When he is born, name him Isaac. Guess what that name means? Isaac means laughter. Once again, Abraham knew that God would keep his word. But would Sarah like her new name? Would she believe that she could have a baby at 90 years old? It would take a miracle. But then God had said that he was more than enough. God had given Abraham a special order. All the men and boys in your house, all the servants, and even Ishmael must be circumcised. This will be the sign of your friendship with me. Abraham was an old man. How could he ever convince the men that this was what God had said? But Abraham obeyed God's word. Being God's friend meant more to Abraham than all of his gold and silver or all his cattle. It meant more than all of his land. If the God who was more than enough was his friend, he would trust him with everything. In his heart, Abraham knew that God meant what he said. But in his head, he could not understand how he and Sarah could still have a son.
He's more than enough. He's more than enough. He is El Shaddai, the God of plenty, the all-sufficient one, God Almighty. He is more than enough. He's more than enough. He's more than enough. He is El Shaddai, the God of plenty, the all-sufficient one, God Almighty. He is more than
It was a hot day, and Abraham was sitting in the door of his tent. As he looked into the distance, he saw 3 men walking towards him. He ran to welcome his guests. Come, let me wash your feet, he said, and please rest under this tree while I get you some food. Sarah made some bread while Abraham killed a calf. His guests waited while Abraham, Sarah, and the servants prepared a feast. The roasting beef and fresh bread smelled so good. This was a meal worth waiting for. After they had eaten, one of the men asked, "Where is Sarah?" Was he going to thank her for the meal? Sarah was inside of the tent. Next year, at this time, Sarah will have a son, the stranger said. Sarah heard it and started to laugh. What was this stranger talking about? Who was he anyway? "Why did you laugh?" the man asked. "Is anything too hard for God?" Abraham remembered the name Isaac. It meant laughter. Surely these men must be messengers from God. The special visitors started to leave. There was something else. They had come to tell Abraham. "We have come to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah," they said. Abraham knew that these were sinful cities. Lot and his family lived there. "Lord, will you kill the good people with the bad?" he asked. "If there are 50 good people, will you spare the cities?" 50 good people, and the cities will not be destroyed. Abraham hesitated. "What if there are only 40? "It still stays," said the Lord. "What about 30? "That is enough to spare the cities," the Lord answered. Abraham was thinking, did Lot have any good friends? "What about if there are only 20? Will you still spare the cities?" "Yes," said the Lord. Abraham wanted to spare Lot's life. "What if there are only 10 good people?" "I will save the cities for just 10 good people," said the Lord. When the messengers arrived at Sodom and Gomorrah, they found the cities full of evil men and women. God had created men to marry women, but here men were married to men, and women married to women. This is something God hated and still hates. Even Lot's own daughters were not living right. The heavenly messengers took Lot's hand and pulled him and his 2 daughters and his wife out of the city. "Run for your life," they said. "The cities will be destroyed with fire from heaven. Don't look back." Lot and his daughters obeyed, but his wife stopped to take one last look at the city where she had lived. Suddenly, she turned into a pillar of salt. The only 3 people who escaped were Lot and his 2 daughters. Surely Lot had made the wrong decision when he moved to Sodom and Gomorrah. God kept his word. When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, they had a baby boy. Abraham and Sarah called him Isaac. That surely was the right name. Sarah said, "God made me laugh, and everybody who hears this will laugh with me." Abraham and Sarah were so pleased. God had given them the son he had promised so many years before. Abraham liked to watch Isaac as he played with the little lambs. He took good care of the boy. One day Isaac would be the father of a great nation of people. God had made that promise, and Abraham knew that God did not lie. Isaac grew to be a young man. He liked being with his father. He could feel how very much his father loved him. Abraham and God had been friends now for many years. Abraham recognized God's voice when he called his name. One day God said, "Abraham, I want you to take your son Isaac and kill him just as you would a lamb. Make him a sacrifice to me." Why was God asking for such an awful thing? Did God want parents to kill their children? Abraham remembered the covenant that he had made with God. God could have anything he wanted. Did God want to take his son? Abraham knew that he had to obey God. He took some wood and some burning coals. Together, he and Isaac and his servants went to the place of sacrifice. Isaac had seen sacrifices before. "We have the fire and we have the wood, but where is the lamb?" he asked. Abraham spoke slowly. "God will provide a lamb for himself." Abraham stopped the servants. "You wait here," he said. "We will go and sacrifice, and we will return." How could they both return? Would God raise Isaac from the dead? Abraham and Isaac built an altar. They placed the wood on it. The fire was nearby. Abraham looked at his son. "Isaac, you are the lamb," he said. He bound his hands and laid his son on the wood. Abraham raised his knife. At that moment, someone called his name. It was an angel. "Abraham," the angel said, "don't harm your son. Now God knows that you love him more than anything else in the world." Just then Abraham saw a ram caught in the brush nearby. Quickly he released Isaac, and together they made a sacrifice. God had provided a lamb. Someday, God would give his only son as a sacrifice, but his son would have to die. This would be God's way of keeping his covenant with Abraham.
Never, never, never have I ever been so happy, happy, happy in my Lord. Never, never, never have I ever been so happy in my life before. He took away my sadness and he filled my heart with gladness. He gave me all that heaven can afford. Never, never, never have I ever been so happy, happy, happy in my Lord. Never, never, never have I